Daniel had always been different. While others spent weekends chasing entertainment, he loved exploring county auctions, places where forgotten items waited for someone to see their worth. One Saturday, the auctioneer announced something unusual. Next up, an abandoned cabin, half an acre of land, sold as is. Starting bid, 25 cents. The crowd laughed. A cabin for a quarter? Worthless, they said. Daniel looked at the papers. The roof sagged, the wood rotted, and weeds had swallowed the walls. Still, he imagined it restored, warm light glowing from windows, smoke rising from a chimney, a peaceful retreat in the woods. Silence hung in the air. Nobody bid. Daniel raised his hand. 25 cents. Sold, the auctioneer declared. The crowd chuckled, but Daniel smiled quietly. When he finally visited the cabin, it was even worse than described. Broken windows, collapsing beams, weeds taller than him. Yet Daniel didn't see ruins. He saw potential. Weekend after weekend, he worked tirelessly. He cleared the land, patched the roof, scrubbed every inch. Slowly, the cabin transformed from a forgotten shack into a cozy little home. Often, as he sat on the small porch he built himself, Daniel thought about how people had laughed at him that day. They saw a joke, but he saw a chance. And now, with every nail hammered and every wall cleaned, the cabin was becoming a symbol of his belief that even the smallest investments could change lives. But what Daniel didn't know was that this quarter purchase, mocked by everyone, was about to become worth millions. And with that fortune came enemies he never expected. As months passed, Daniel's cabin slowly came back to life. The broken roof no longer leaked. The wooden walls gleamed after sanding, and the weeds that once strangled the land were gone. What had started as a quarter's gamble was now a small but beautiful retreat, hidden deep in the woods. But while Daniel worked quietly, the world around him was changing. A major development company announced plans for a luxury resort just a few miles away. Construction crews carved new roads, real estate signs popped up overnight, and suddenly, the land everyone once mocked became the center of attention. Daniel began to notice unfamiliar cars slowing down near his property. Realtors started leaving cards in his mailbox. At first, he ignored them, until one day, a local appraiser knocked on his door with surprising news. "Do you know what this property is worth now?" the man asked, almost in disbelief. Daniel shrugged. The appraiser smiled and said, "Easily in the millions." Daniel laughed at first, thinking it was a mistake. But within weeks, multiple offers came pouring in. Some were for $3 million, others for $5. Newspapers caught wind of the story and ran headlines. "Man buys cabin for 25 cents, now sitting on a gold mine." People who had laughed at him at the auction now looked at him with envy. Yet Daniel didn't care about the money. Every board he had fixed, every nail he had hammered, carried his sweat and pride. This cabin wasn't just property, it was a piece of him. Instead of selling, he opened its doors to friends and neighbors. Families came for weekends, children played in the yard, and people found peace in a place built with heart, not greed. By the end of the year, the property's estimated value reached $10 million. Daniel often sat on his porch, watching the sunset, still amazed at how his single quarter had turned into something extraordinary. But just when life seemed perfect, an envelope appeared in his mailbox. Its seal bore the letters HOA. Daniel thought it was just a routine notice, maybe something about the new development nearby. But as he tore it open and read the words inside, his smile faded. The letter didn't welcome him. It threatened him. According to the Homeowners Association, his land now fell under their control. And unless he obeyed their rules, they claimed they had the power to take it away. At first, Daniel didn't take the letter too seriously. A homeowners association? He thought it was just a formality, maybe a notice about road construction or community improvements. But as he read each line carefully, his chest grew heavy. The letter claimed that because new neighborhoods had been built near his cabin, his land was now part of their association. According to their bylaws, he was required to pay monthly fees, follow strict landscaping rules, and even get approval for any repairs or changes. But what shocked him most was the final paragraph. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including possible seizure of property. Daniel froze. Seizure? His property? The cabin he had bought legally, restored with his own hands, and cherished for over a year, how could they claim ownership? Within weeks, things grew worse. Bright notices began appearing on his cabin door. Violation, unapproved exterior. Violation, non-standard landscaping. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. His cabin wasn't even part of their gated community, yet they acted as if they owned it. HOA representatives started showing up unannounced. One man in a suit walked around the property with a clipboard, measuring the porch Daniel had built. Another warned him that his rustic style didn't meet community standards. "If you don't comply," the man said coldly, "you'll face heavy fines." Daniel tried to reason with them. "This is my land. I bought it outright at a county auction. I've paid my taxes. You have no claim here." But his words fell on deaf ears. The HOA only grew more aggressive, sending letters demanding thousands in fines and threatening lawsuits. Nights became restless. Daniel would sit by the fireplace, staring at the flames, wondering how everything had changed so suddenly. Just a year ago, people laughed at his cabin. Now, when it was worth millions, everyone seemed to want a piece of it. He began to feel cornered, as though powerful forces were closing in, and yet, deep inside, Daniel knew one thing for certain. If the HOA wanted his cabin, they would have to fight for it, because he wasn't letting go that easily. Daniel's life turned upside down. What was once his peaceful retreat now felt like a battlefield. Every few days, another letter arrived from the HOA, each one colder than the last. They fined him for non-compliance, accused him of breaking community rules, and even threatened to place a lien on his cabin. Friends who had once praised his determination now warned him to give up. "Daniel, they're too powerful," one neighbor said softly. "Just sell the cabin while you can." But Daniel couldn't. This wasn't just about money. This cabin represented his belief that hard work and persistence could turn something forgotten into something beautiful. Nights became harder. He sat alone by the fireplace he had rebuilt, listening to the crackling wood and wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Sometimes he felt the weight of defeat pressing on his shoulders. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered the day he bought the cabin. People had laughed at him, called it worthless, and yet he had proved them wrong. Now he was determined to do it again. So, Daniel fought back. He spent long hours in dusty county archives, searching for proof. He dug through boxes of old deeds, tax receipts, and legal documents. Each discovery gave him hope, but nothing seemed strong enough to silence the HOA's threats. Still, he refused to quit. Meanwhile, the HOA turned up the pressure. At a community meeting, one board member openly mocked him. "He thinks that old shack makes him special," the man sneered. "But rules are rules, and in this community, no one is above them." The room filled with laughter. Daniel stood in silence, his fists clenched under the table. That night he sat outside on the porch he had built with his own hands, staring at the stars. The cabin stood behind him, strong and steady, just like his resolve. "They can laugh at me," he whispered to himself, "but they'll never take what's mine." The fight was wearing him down, but inside, Daniel knew the truth was out there. He just had to find it. Daniel's hands trembled as he pulled the dusty folder from the archives. Inside, buried under decades of forgotten paperwork, was the original deed from the county auction, the very document that proved his ownership. But there was more. At the bottom of the yellowed page, in faint ink, was a clause almost no one had noticed. "This property shall remain independent of any future community or association claims, and ownership shall be absolute." Daniel's heart pounded. This was it, the shield he had been searching for. With this deed, the HOA had no authority, no claim, and no power over his land. A week later, Daniel walked into the packed HOA meeting hall. The room buzzed with whispers. Some expected him to give up, others expected him to beg. But Daniel didn't come empty-handed. He came with truth. When the board tried to call him out for violations, Daniel calmly laid the deed on the table. His voice was steady as he read each line aloud. The room grew quiet, the mocking smirks slowly fading from the faces of the board members. When he reached the clause that excluded his land from HOA control, the silence was deafening. The HOA president shifted uncomfortably. One by one, members glanced at each other, realizing they had overstepped. Their threats, their fines, their claims, it had all been built on nothing. The very document in Daniel's hands shattered their power. For the first time in months, Daniel felt the weight lift off his shoulders. He had fought, he had endured, and now he had won. The cabin was his, legally, undeniably, and forever. As he left the hall, neighbors who had once doubted him now looked at him with respect. Some even clapped softly, others nodded in quiet admiration. But Daniel didn't need their approval. His victory wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving himself right. That night, Daniel sat on the porch of his cabin, the cool breeze brushing against his face. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the woods. He looked at the cabin, the one he had bought for a single quarter, restored with his own hands and defended against powerful forces. It wasn't just worth $10 million. To Daniel, it was priceless. It was freedom, courage, and proof that sometimes the smallest risks lead to the greatest rewards. The HOA thought they could take his dream, but in the end, Daniel's 25-cent cabin became a $10 million victory, and a story no one would ever forget.